All right, well, our next panel, Supply and Demand, How Industry Evolves. We'll explore the dynamic shifts in energy supply and demand and how different sectors are adapting to meet the evolving challenges. So I'd now like to invite our next distinguished group of leaders to join me for this discussion. I invite Todd Snitchler, Rich Powell, Michelle Patron, Todd, how are you doing? And David Dardis to join. Good to see you. Thank you so much. Good to see you again. That's great. That's okay. Hey, Rich. Well, I was, but I mean, I really can sit anywhere. I mean, it's easy. Well, great. Well, thank you very much. Before I begin with my questions, and it really is good to see everybody again, I'll just take a few minutes. Why don't you take a minute to just introduce yourself and say a little bit about your organization. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Mark, and thanks to USEA for the invitation. I'm Todd Snitchler. I'm the President and CEO of the Electric Power Supply Association. We're the only national trade association that represents competitive power generators across the country. Our members own and operate about 165,000 megawatts of generation of all types in all the markets from California to Texas to New England, New York, PJM, and even some in other parts of the country as well. Our members still own all types of resources, so coal, natural gas, hydro, geothermal, nuclear, battery storage, wind, and solar. So our members are invested in all of the markets in all parts of the country in all types of technology and are working to deploy new and innovative technologies to ensure system reliability. So looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Todd. Rich.
Well, first, huge thanks, Mark and USEA, for hosting us for this incredibly important discussion. So Rich Powell, I'm the CEO of the Clean Energy Buyers Association. CEBA is the largest aggregation of electricity buyers in the world. So our members represent something north of $20 trillion in market cap. Some of our members contribute more of that market cap than others, but we love all of our members. They represent a broad range of industries, from high technology to advanced industrials to metals and mining to defense to agriculture. We're also very lucky to have a number of energy providers in the membership as well, including a number of investor-owned independent power producers and private independent power producers, including Constellation, and also a number of suppliers of technologies and services. The thing that unites our membership is all of the buyers have a commitment to carbon-free electricity procurement over some period of time. And so they are buying a broad range of carbon-free electricity around the country and increasingly around the world. In the US, they've collectively purchased about 84 gigawatts of clean electricity as of Q2 this year, and that covers the full sweep of carbon-free resources, wind, solar, now geothermal, and of our 5 largest deals this year, 4 were nuclear energy as well. So that's a new development in our membership.
Oh, thank you, Rich. Thank you. Well, Michelle, why don't you tell us a little about yourself? We know Microsoft, but maybe you can shed some insight about why Microsoft is up here on at an energy.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Mark, for your leadership and for USEA for all you do to convene. And I just want to recognize all the partners that we have both on the panel and around the room that really enable Microsoft to help it meet our energy goals. And so for me, my background, I actually serve as General Manager of Sustainability Policy at Microsoft. So that means I work with our business groups, the teams that procure energy, and as well as the teams that build solutions for our energy customers to help make sure we are advancing our sustainability goals and to work with governments across the company and around the world on policies that enable us to do so. 4 years ago, we set bold targets to be carbon negative, water positive, to net zero waste, and to protect as much land as possible. And an important part of that is how we do that on electricity. And so I look forward to sharing some of our observations and how we're using innovation to drive that in the conversation today.
Well, thank you, Michelle. We're really looking forward to hearing from you. David Dardis.
Thanks,
Hi,
Mark.
David.
Yeah, I'm David Dardis. I'm the Chief Legal Officer, Executive Vice President of Constellation. Constellation is the largest owner-operator of nuclear power. We produce more than 10% of the nation's zero-emitting electricity in the country, which is pretty cool, a little small company out of Baltimore. We also have a portfolio of gas, wind, solar, other generating assets. We also like to believe that we have the premier customer-serving platform in America, wholesale, retail, power, and gas. We have been spending a lot of our time trying to find innovative solutions for meeting our customer needs, and that's going to be a big priority for us over the next decade and beyond. I personally have been spending a lot of my time, not just on the legal portfolio that I manage, but also on the regulatory and policy issues that are relevant for this conversation. So, Mark, thank you for having me. It's great to be back here in Washington with you all, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Really looking forward to it. So, Michelle, let's start with you. I mean, Microsoft obviously is known as a great innovator of our times. You're driving now a lot of other policy determinations with your, I wouldn't say insatiable, with your growing energy demands. Let's talk about this new role that you see yourself in and how it is that you're thinking creatively, to help supply your energy needs.
Absolutely. So I'd like to share a little bit of background on how Microsoft approaches energy and then give you a few examples of how we are using that procurement lever to drive innovation. So when we think about energy, it really is important to step back and think about why Microsoft uses energy. We build and we operate data centers. We build and we operate data centers because our customers, which are small businesses and large customers, are large companies, they are local governments, they are federal agencies, they are NGOs, and they are nonprofits, and they want to use digital tools and AI to provide services to their customers and their constituents. So that's what data centers do. They are an economic enabler. And they require electricity to run. It's a small fraction of total electricity use, but it's growing. And we know that it's growing, and we have a role and an opportunity as an energy customer to help support, work with our utilities and our partners to help support a resilient and robust grid to bring new clean electricity online and to drive innovation. This is something that we've been thinking about and working on for a while at Microsoft. And so we've built out a robust procurement team that works very closely in the different states and around countries around the world to work on power purchasing agreements. We have legal teams that focus on the regulatory filings. We have engineers that work to connect the data centers to distribution lines. And so we work really closely at all of those levels with our utilities and with our partners to help meet our energy needs and to help support the local grid. When we think about innovation and how we do that, we see three key levers. One is our procurement, which is purchasing power. The second is in our technology. And the third is investments that we make. We actually have a $1 billion climate innovation fund, and as part of that, to take technologies from the lab to the market, we are looking at grid enhancing technologies and other different types of opportunities. I'd like to give three examples of how we are using procurement right now to drive innovation. One is how we're bringing new energy sources online, giving that demand signal. The second is how we are partnering and scaling with our partners to scale those markets. And the third is how we're working with our utilities partners to develop new contracts that can be replicated. The first, let's talk a little bit about how we're using procurement to bring these new energy sources online. We've been a leader in clean energy procurement. This started with renewables, where we have brought working with developers and utilities, dozens of new wind and solar projects online. We're building on that with a new partnership with Brookfield Asset Management to bring 10 gigawatts more online, both in the US and Europe. And then we're looking deeper into the supply chain and how we can send our procurement signal for the inputs, what's needed for some of these generation projects in order to provide more of that capacity. So working with one of our manufacturers, Q-Cells, to provide that signal on the solar panels to be able to catalyze manufacturing here in the US with a new plant in Georgia to provide new solar panels for a number of our projects and the projects that utilities are developing for us. The second example is how we're now taking that first mover motion and bringing that to advanced carbon-free energy and also clean firm energy. So the exciting partnership that we just announced with Constellation to bring 850 megawatts of new additional carbon-free capacity into PJM and generation through the Clean Crane Energy project is one example of that. Another is looking a little bit further down the road towards fusion, and Microsoft was part of the first agreement to bring new fusion online, also partnering with Constellation, and our partner Helion, which has a 50 megawatt project that they're looking to bring online in Washington State. The third way is that we've been working with other customers to really send that demand signal for advanced carbon-free energy. So earlier this year, we announced an advanced market commitment with one of our tech partners, tech peers, Google, and another large energy user, Nucor Steel, to aggregate 500 megawatts of demand to be able to help identify new advanced projects that can come online by 2030 with different parameters in terms of tech neutral approach, has an emissions profile, tech maturity criteria, but we're looking through those projects now and hopefully we'll be able to announce something soon. And just the third example I want to show is how we're doing this on contracting, working with a number of our other customer peers and working with Duke Energy on a new accelerated clean energy tariff that helps think about the issues that are surrounding bringing online some of these higher cost, longer term advanced carbon solutions like advanced nuclear or long duration storage, and to do it in a way that other customers can then replicate and perhaps other regions can replicate. So we're tapping into this through procurement, we're tapping into this innovation and through investment in order to be able to do it.
Michelle, thank you for those insights. And you can definitely sense, I mean, they are a company of constant innovation and change, looking forward and thinking creatively. It's evident in her explanation. And thank you very much for taking the time to go into each of these. Of course, you mentioned your exciting partnership with Constellation, and so I want to turn on that. But before I turn it over to David, just for our audience's awareness, we didn't really talk about this, David, but David was a key FERC staffer during the times when energy markets were actually being created and evolving. David brings a unique perspective to the business world in being there at the forefront of addressing a lot of these policy changes, which were quite controversial, and it was quite an accomplishment while he was there that FERC took the leadership that it did, and it was upheld by the courts, by the way, typically. So David brought this, to Constellation. And I think that one of the reasons I asked David to be on this panel was, for him to describe from sort of the world that you heard from before we got to this panel, how that can evolve to result in what I think is a historic announcement between these two companies. And so with that laying the foundation, David, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
I'm not going to go back to Genesis, I don't think. But I've seen a lot in my career, and not as much as you, Mark, to age you versus me a little bit. But it has been quite a journey, and there's no more exciting time in our industry than now. Not just the power industry, but just the broader economy and what's going on. And I'm going to talk about Leopold Aschenbrenner later, which I bored people with last night at dinner, and you all should Google him and look at his paper, Situational Awareness. It's only 50,000 words. Just read the front and the back. But to your point or question, Mark, I've seen it all. I started at Constellation in 2007. We were worried about how we were going to explain how much money we were making every month to the street, because power prices and natural gas prices were what they were, and we thought that these nuclear power plants were going to continue to make money for the foreseeable future. Obviously, we all saw what happened in 2008, and also with natural gas prices. And then I spent a big portion of my career subsequently, begging and pleading for policy to support what we thought were the crown jewels of the energy industry in America, these nuclear assets. We have 23 units at 13 sites. And in fact, all the way up until 2020, 2021, I was in Springfield begging the state government there to please keep these units open and alive, and the state did step up, and it was a bridge to where we are today. And the market is starting to realize just the value of these assets, and it's not, I think the future is not going to be about having the government try and solve these problems. It's going to be about the partnership we have with companies like Microsoft, other customers, serving their needs, given what we're talking about this conference with this huge increase in demand. And let me make one little segue on that point. This is a great conference, and this is what we need to be talking about. And energy policy is as hot as anything right now in Washington. But I think what's more important is what's going on and what's driving this energy conversation, and that is the evolution of the economy, what's going on with the digital and data economy, what that means for the country's future, not just from a military national security perspective, but what it means for our economy more broadly. If you read Leopold's paper, if you believe half of what he has to say, it's astonishing and frightening, to be honest, but we are going to have a very different economy the next 10 years than we have today. And if we don't keep pace with that need, and we don't solve these problems, which are going to seem pretty, in my words, kind of JV, compared to what's at stake, we're going to really regret it. So I'm excited to be part of this conversation. Thank you to Microsoft. You all have really been a leader and a great partner with us for many, many years, and look forward to finding some more solutions down the road.
Well, David, I'm going to come back to you to actually answer my question, but before that, and it's Leopold Aschenbrenner for those taking the time to Google. But I didn't mean any slight to Microsoft when I said Google.
Copilot works too.
Let me turn to Todd. Right, Todd, you have a wide membership.
Sure.
Right, you have heard what we have been talking about. Well, you've heard about nuclear and you heard about other things. Why don't you talk to us about how the generation side is looking at these challenges, to meet these increasing demands?
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for the question. We view it as opportunity as much as challenge. This is the first time we've seen load growth in a meaningful fashion, probably in 20 or more years. That is a good problem. If you're a generator, you're always looking for ways for you to be able to produce more electrons and sell them. That's what we're in the business of doing. And this has created real opportunity. At the same time, there are real challenges that exist in order to actually get things constructed and do so in a timely fashion. I mean, the technology exists and we know how to do it. Our members have developed and constructed thousands of megawatts over the last 15 or 20 years and done so in a way that moves the risk off of captive customers or ratepayers and onto shareholders and investors. I know the prior panel was talking about how do we be mindful of customer costs. Well, that's one important way to do it, is to shift the risk off of them and so they don't have to pay for that. And so that's what our members do. So if we make a bad investment, the people who bear the risk are the shareholders and investors. We think that's an important distinction. It's one of the tools that we think will be fundamental in order to get from here to where we're going and mitigate costs as much as possible. The second piece of that, I think, is innovation, and I think Microsoft and Constellation's agreement, amongst others that are currently being debated in various jurisdictions around town, are critically important in showing that innovation will drive solutions that will help us get where we want to go. It's not the good old days of let's do it the way we've always done it. We're going to have to think differently and more creatively about how we achieve some of the objectives. I know Rich's members think about that all the time as well, because how we think about solving problems that are different than what we experienced in the past is going to be fundamental. So how are we looking at it? One, I think you've got problems with permitting and siting that are going to have to be addressed. We have to wrestle with this issue and get to a conclusion. It's not only wires, it's not only generation, it's not only pipes. It's going to have to be everything as part of that solution set, because if we're going to address the near-term issue of ensuring reliability, ensuring that we can have the economic growth that we all support and would advocate for, at the same time as we are looking at what the technologies will be that can be delivered in a timely fashion, we're going to need to see a range of resources that are available. I think that requires us to have a little bit of a more candid conversation about what those might be. I know virtually every company, including our members, has emissions reductions goals that are critically important. They are working on achieving those outcomes. But the pace of change and the technologies that are readily available today might not match the timelines that people had aspired to in the past. And I think the growing delta between aspirational policy goals and operational realities is becoming a more profound challenge. And I think we have to have a conversation that's grounded in reality about how the system actually functions to help us get from here to there. The timeline might be a little slower than some would like. The outcome is still going to be the same, but the technologies need to be available, they need to be cost effective, and they need to be deployable, and that's one of the challenges that we're bumping into. And I think it's important to observe that it's not just a restructured markets issue. I know some would like to cast it in that light. I don't think that's the case. it's still permitting and siting, even if you're a vertically integrated utility that's got an IRP. You've got to wrestle with the same challenges that come with opposition to new projects. You've still got to deal with supply chain issues and getting turbines. You've still got to deal with the construction timelines that exist, as well as the EPA rules that are going to affect what generation resources can operate and at what level and for how long. If you can only run your CCGT for 40% of the time, well, that's going to influence your investment decisions. And so how do we think about what that will look like going forward? I think suggests certainly to me and to our members that this is a more holistic issue than it might at first appear. And I think we all want to try and solve that, whether you're public power, you're the rural co-ops, you're EPSA members, or you're EEI members. All of us are trying to achieve the same objective and ensure that reliable system that'll ensure the economic growth that we're looking for. So I think those are the issues that have to be addressed. I know our members are engaged in it, as are virtually all of the other stakeholders, but we're going to have to come to some decision points and actually make decisions that will help us achieve those objectives.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. Rich, you know, you're an example of sort of an evolving thought process that created a new group, right? Relatively recently, the Clean Energy Buyers Association. You know, you might think that, you know, you're negotiating demand and it's about cost, but so it's a policy group here, and the enormity after establishing it, of course, is one thing, but now you really have to get your members to demonstrate a new way of thinking, of dealing with typically vendors of a particular thing that you need in the policy space and in the partnership space. Can you talk to us about your experience with that and how it is that you see potential ways forward?
Sure. So just as a quick history of the Clean Energy Buyers Association, our organization originally evolved as a community of practice amongst very large buyers of electricity to share sort of deal technology and awareness of how you'd actually transact selectively clean electrons, carbon-free electrons, largely in open competitive markets, but also how to do that with investor-owned vertically integrated utilities through new tariff structures. And so much of SEBA's history was working within those contexts, but always, to the point we're talking about here, but always working in a flat demand market. So working on, okay, the existing system, the existing capacity we have in the background is sufficient to meet the market's overall needs. How do we make relatively incremental changes in the power mix within that overall flat market? This new reality of increasing load growth is constructively forcing our membership in this moment of incredible opportunity where we're reshoring manufacturing to the United States, we're keeping the lead in high technology around the world, we're electrifying industries across the country. This is an incredible moment of opportunity. I think too often that gets lost in the narrative around all this. Like, you're welcome, America. It's very good that electricity is growing again. Electricity demand is growing again. Just important to note. But it does make us have to think about things in a different way. And so I think the point that Todd was raising, that we really have to think about capacity and capacity growth in the overall grid. And that's why so many of our members are now focused on the clean firm and the flexibility challenges. Our members remain committed to carbon-free power of all sources. Collectively, we bought 8 gigawatts of wind and solar in the first half of this year. There's still an enormous positive role, particularly for low-cost variable wind and solar resources. Those are good resources. And when the grid is growing, you need to add capacity that can run flexibly and meet demand at all hours of the day, even when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. And so that includes the full range of firm and flexible resources. So that includes long-duration energy sources, advanced fission and hopefully fusion one day as well. Hopeful that those technologies work as well. That includes additional, less recognized renewable resources like geothermal and new hydropower. And it may well include a significant continuing role for hydrocarbon-based resources with advanced control technologies, carbon capture and differentiated gas and all those sorts of things. Those resources may well participate far into a carbon-free future, and certainly are very important today as we increase as we increase load. But it is a new way of thinking. And also, to Todd's point, it forces us to grapple with the reality that we need to build a tremendous amount of new firm and variable generation around the country and grapple with all of the permitting challenges that relates, especially as so much of that is going to happen more and more on public lands and in the West and all these places. I mean, if you're going to develop enhanced geothermal, for example, that's largely a public lands issue. It's going to force us to significantly upgrade the grid we have. That's one of the fastest things that we can do to break down challenges in interconnect queues around the country. We can do so much more with grid enhancing technologies with the grid that we have today to quickly onboard more resources just within our existing grids. And we're going to fundamentally have to expand the grid that we have. We need more transmission within regions. We need more transmission across regions if we're going to maintain the affordability and reliability of the system. We can continue to try to do things the way we have been doing them, but the only thing we know about that is that power prices will increase significantly across the country, and that won't just be for the folks that are driving the growth. The way that our power markets are structured, those increased power prices will be experienced by everyone. So really a lot is at stake. This moment of economic growth and opportunity is at stake unless we're able to pursue some of this really important policy. So I just want to add significantly to Todd's point and support for a significant package of permitting reform that takes on all of these issues, new generation upgrades to our existing grid, and new transmission to expand the grid. And I know we've got a terrific start with that legislation that's now moving through the Senate. That's been developed and moved forward by Senators Manchin, Chair Manchin and Ranking Member Barrasso, and we're very excited about that. We're very excited for prospects of additional legislation moving through the House, and perhaps even something happening in the scarce few weeks that exist before the end of this Congress. But we're extremely excited about that prospect.
Well, that's great. That's really quite optimistic.
Can I respond to one
Of
thing?
course you can, because I was going to
And
come
I'm
back to you
gonna
anyway.
answer your question maybe a little bit more directly than I did last time as well. But to the challenge and opportunity that Rich you're talking about, and a little bit more color about Michelle's discussion of the transaction that we recently entered into, what Constellation is doing to respond to this challenge, and how what's going on in the economy is providing the opportunity. We did announce a 20-year contract with Microsoft to restart the Crane Clean Energy Center at the former TMI site. Very exciting, 835 megawatts. We'll be online in 2018 at the latest. Hopefully, if PJM can get its interconnection queue process accelerated, it'll be 2017.
Wait, what year coming online?
2018. I'm sorry, 2028. I'm
Okay,
sorry,
2028. Okay.
2028.
Can we do it in 2018?
Yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be nice. 2028. And that unit shut down just a handful of years ago because of the economic challenges we had with the markets. And so that's the first piece. And we had our leadership meeting 2 days ago in Baltimore with all of our executives, and we announced to the team that we're standing up a whole new organization to lean into new clean generation, which is something that our CEO, when he first became CEO, said he would never do during his tenure because he knew investors were afraid we're going to do something stupid. But now that we're seeing the possibilities, and we've got 2 senior executives who are standing up an organization to lean into developing new clean resources at our existing sites. We have 23 locations. We have the best sites to put, whether it's SMRs or other technologies. We've got access to rail, we've got the land, we've got local community support for our assets. So it's a really exciting time for Constellation, and we think that's going to be a big part of the solution moving forward, is adding megawatts at our existing locations.
If I could just quickly
Sure,
add
Michelle.
just why this is such an important project for us. I mean, I was listening to several of the conversations earlier today, and this is an opportunity to bring a significant chunk of new capacity. So this is additional capacity. This is carbon-free capacity, 850 megawatts, and it is going on to the PJM grid. And so that also has a lot of ancillary benefits for the grid, and it is through procurement, Microsoft helping to cover the costs of this generation. And so I think just understanding how, companies are thinking about this and thinking about being part of that partnership that I know one of the previous panelists talked about, of working with utilities, of working with the regional transmission organizations, of working with partners to help really think through the challenges that we face together.
So I want to talk just a little bit about that, and I don't want to get too wonky on this, but I mean, observers only know what we see. And so for years we saw the auction market, say in PJM, really not really having price formation sufficient for a capacity market, and this is future build to meet future. Then we saw the most recent one, I don't know if it surprised anybody, but it was a stark difference. It set, I think, for the first time, more accurate price signals to send for the future development. And so I want your comment on that. Not all RTOs are the same, but I'm curious about if that sent a market, Michelle, to get you excited about future bills in PJM. And David, you too talked about future bills, but on sort of existing sites or existing, we do. And great thing about this 3 Mile Island thing is you looked at what we have and to make use of it, as opposed to betting on the future and the additional stuff we need. Can you shed some light on that?
Well, you can too.
Okay, I'll start. I mean, so a couple questions you asked. One about the capacity market. One about where we're locating. And some of the prior panels talked about the siting and permitting challenges, getting the transmission there. The existing sites are the perfect places to do it. We own the land. We control the land. Like I said, we have community support. We have access to transmission. There's really no better place. And so we think we're very well positioned to explore opportunities for adding megawatts, like I said, with SMRs, whether it's gas and with CCUS, other sort of low-emitting opportunities. And this is something that we haven't done in a long time, but it's really exciting for us. On the capacity market piece, we saw what happened. It obviously provided a price signal for those who are following along at home. The PJM capacity market provides a 1-year price signal 3 years in the future. Not sure if that's like the most robust market design for providing developers the certainty that they need for making, multi-billion-dollar investments that will be recovered over 20, 30 years. But certainly those price signals are more advantageous than what we have seen for a long time. PJM recently filed to push off the auction to look at some market reforms because of that price signal, dealing with the RMR units among other things, load forecast, the demand curve, really getting into the muck here with the wonky FERC stuff. But those market design, the resolution of those market design issues are critical for being able to develop new projects. But I think more importantly, going forward, it's really going to be about the commercial solutions and the innovation that we're working out with customers like Microsoft directly, as opposed to relying on regulatory schemes. That's my hope anyway. And I think what we've heard today about just this significant amount of demand coming on the system, that we can get away from these more parochial fights at FERC and in the states around these policy issues and really get the solutions with customers. It's going to require some work. I mean, we heard AEP. We've been in that case with their tariff. We're having our own discussions, actually not many discussions, I would say more challenges with the utilities in which we operate. And again, I think that's short-sighted in the long run. We need to get past those issues because there's so much more at stake for us to get these policy issues right and move on with powering the country and meeting the needs that we need, not just from an economic development perspective, but from a national security perspective.
Yeah, and I want to follow up on the policy comments that Todd, that you made, and Rich. And I know Microsoft, I would imagine, typically doesn't necessarily lead a charge on any policy changes, but in everything that you're working on, right? What are the most significant hurdles that you have encountered, and were you to recommend to policymakers to consider a change, what is it?
So we do actively advocate advocate on energy across the country, both federally and in the states. And we're also, work really closely with our trade associations, including SEBA, to be able to do that. We see three kind of key opportunities. We will add the customer voice on permitting reform. That is really important in order to get any of this built to meet energy demand, to achieve the energy goals. We need the generation, the transmission, the distribution, all of the different things that we need to bring to bear. I think the second bucket is really modernizing and updating the grid, both at the work that's been done at the federal level and working closely with the important role that states have here and RTOs in terms of continuing to modernize the transmission planning and the interconnection reform. And then the third has to do with the opportunity we have to bring some of these exciting advanced advanced carbon-free technologies to market. We need to get, in some cases, the first of a kind built, and then help bring down the costs and the deployment time to get the nth of a kind built. And then there's been support at the federal level to do that, and that needs to continue so that we can help bring some of this clean firm continue to market.
I mean, do you see tax incentives as still being a primary driver on some of these newer technologies? I
mean, there are all different types of incentives that are helping to bring down the cost in these advanced. I mean, they have played an important role in helping to get, some of where the advanced nuclear, the storage, some of these tech neutral, 100% clean firm technologies there.
Well, and so Todd, as you said, you have experience both at the state level and at the federal level. And you have sufficient experience in this town to know sort of what's doable, if you will, right? And this is obviously a very complex person, a complex situation. Two things can be true. Right. And we know we generally are in support, right, of the bipartisan. But why don't you talk in terms of, what do you really think can be done, and if what can be done, though, continues to still not quite solve everything. So we know what's in the bill, but really, is that enough? Is there something else we should be thinking about? Are we tied too much to our efforts to address problems, from our past points of view?
Yeah, thanks for the easy question, Mark. First, I'm gonna take legislative privilege and answer the question I wish you had asked me, and I'll go back a little bit before I answer the one you did ask me, which is to David's point about going down the rabbit hole a little. I think the last auction in PJM sent the first signal that suggested that new supply was needed in quite a long time. For those, as David said, for those watching at home, the last 2 years before this auction were two record low auctions back to back. That signal said retire. So units did exactly what the market said they should do, and they exited the system or announced exiting from the system. And now you see the supply going up, or the demand going up, supply going down. I'm a lawyer, not an economist, and even I know that creates problems. Like, we have got to address some of those issues. And so you're seeing that first signal that is saying we need to make investments in new generation resources. I think you've also seen responses to that already, in that organizations have made announcements about restarting their development departments in order to look at where new generation could be constructed. And I think that's a good first step, but I also caution that one auction does not a trend make. So let's make sure that we're managing expectations a little bit. To your point about what's actually doable, and are we focusing on things in the rearview mirror perhaps too much, I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. There are some issues that are going to have to be addressed about how we make sure that we can achieve the desired outcomes. That requires some market reform related issues, as David noted. PJM's delayed the auction again in an effort to try and resolve that. I think we also need to have people kind of leave their respective corners and try to find commonality in the middle. I know that's verboten these days. We don't do it in Washington, but that's what's going to be required in order for us to try and achieve some of the outcomes. Nobody's going to win everything. I was talking to my friend on the transmission side before I came up here, and I said to Christina, there's likely going to have to be some eggs broken in order for us to make the omelet. And I think everybody's going to have to recognize that at least one of their eggs may be broken in the process. But getting from here to the outcome that we're trying to achieve, which is a reliable system with sufficient resources and the ability to deliver both the commodities that are needed to power the system, as well as to move the electrons from where they're being generated to where they're going to be needed, is going to require compromise. I know that's easier said than done. I do think that the rational middle is going to have to poke its head up and say, you know, we're still here, and we need to arrive at some of the solutions. I think the Manchin-Barrasso bill is an effort to try and achieve some of that middle ground. It doesn't please everyone in every way, which means it's probably at a pretty good spot to work from. But I do think that policymakers, both at the state and federal level, are going to have to come to the realization that either timelines may have to be adjusted, aspirational goals may have to be tempered or pushed out, technologies that have been disfavored may have to be put up with, that's a technical term, for longer than maybe they wanted to, in order for us to deliver the outcomes that we want. In the end, everyone wants the same thing. They want cleaner air, cleaner water. They want a reliable system that's affordable and sustainable going forward. That means we're going to have some rational conversations that mean you can't, and present company included, you can't just read from your book. You're going to have to actually go to the table and say, what are the things that we can compromise on to achieve those outcomes? Are we at a political climate where that's doable? Well, ask me in 2 weeks, and then I'll have maybe a little better answer on that.
Do you think it's going to change?
I think I think the threat of the lights
The
going
atmosphere, that is.
out, I doubt it. But I do think the reality of potential blackouts and brownouts and the reality of the situation is starting to come home with folks. And I think that they may still want to offer their talking points, but I think the rationality of I can't afford to have my constituents' lights go out. No state chairman or state regulator wants the lights to go out. No governor wants the lights to go out. No federal regulator or generator or electric distribution utility or anybody else is looking for that outcome. So I think we're going to get to the point where the cooler heads will come together and come up with some solutions that work. There may be some wrestling in the meantime in order to get from here to there, and I think that's to be expected. But I think if people do it in good faith, we can get to an outcome that is going to make some sense. And we're overdue for that discussion.
Oh. Rich, your point of view on Todd's observations.
Yeah. So I'll make 3 points on I think what we can get done, what we need to get done on policy going forward. The first, actually, just to build on Michelle's point, I think we should acknowledge that insofar as a lot of the solution here are some of these new advanced technologies, we should remember that these didn't just happen in a vacuum. They're the result of assiduous work by Congress and by departments of energy in the last several administrations that have just slowly, steadily, in a quite bipartisan way, supported a whole suite of technologies out there. I was very lucky to join one of our members last week, Amazon, when they announced another deal in the advanced nuclear space with X-Energy, and that's one of the technologies, for example, that benefited from the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program that you oversaw in the previous administration, supported by the Energy Act of 2020, and then fully funded by the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So very bipartisan legislation. We do need, though, to get the job done on demonstrating these technologies. And so there's actually quite a bit of innovation policy that remains just to make sure we actually have this new suite of tools available. And this goes for advanced nuclear, enhanced geothermal, gas with carbon capture, long duration energy storage. That whole suite of technologies still has to actually get steel in the ground and prove that it works, so that it can become a big part of our solution. And I think innovation policy remains a very bipartisan lane with, I think, a lot of support on every side of the aisle going forward. I won't add anything further on the permitting and transmission reform side, but I think the urgency from all sectors on that is just building and building and building. And so if that can't happen this year in the lame duck, I think that will be a top priority for any Congress and any administration, starting next year. The last thing I do have to mention, and you sort of teased us all with this question earlier, so I will actually answer it. I'm going to talk about tax incentives, and so folks may have seen yesterday's announcement. Level 10 is one of the aggregators of power purchase agreements across the country, and they publish a quarterly analysis of the prices of PPAs that they're seeing. PPAs, new power purchase agreements for electricity generation of all types, are significantly up. And so they were seeing, just for example, solar power purchase agreement prices hovering now in the mid-50s for new generation, and wind hovering in the new 60s for new generation. That's after the effect of the tax incentives going into those things. New gas generation hovers around in the same. We've benefited from low-cost energy across this country because we were leveraging a lot of existing gas that was increasing its capacity factor and leveraging a lot of very, very low cost new wind and solar alongside of that. That's how energy prices remained so low across this country. Again, because the grid wasn't growing. Now the grid's growing, and the new energy coming out of the system, that is what is going to set our power prices. If the technology neutral tax incentives go away, the wind, the solar, the new advanced nuclear, the geothermal, the fossils with carbon capture, all of that that would have benefited from that, that will all become, on average, about 40% more expensive on the generating side. And so you'll see new power coming online more in the 70s and low 80s, and that is multiples of the energy price that we all experienced and benefited from in the last decade and a half. So that is, I realize Congress is going to have an incredibly difficult next time. I don't know why anyone's running for Congress right now. It's going to be incredibly difficult time, an incredibly difficult set of equities to balance in the next Congress with the tax bill. But folks should realize that electricity prices are intimately tied up in the decisions that are made in the next Congress, and particularly around the technology neutral tax incentives. And so I think that that's a really important certainly message that we're trying to share on behalf of the energy buying community, and that we hope we can work constructively with Congress on finding the right solution on that to maintain the affordability of the electricity system.
That's very insightful. Thank you for that. So I'll just pose this question to you, looking 10 years out. How do you see the energy landscape? And if you need to qualify it, that if we don't do this, it'll look like this. I'd like to hear each of your comments about this.
Is this part going to be recorded? And are we going to come back to it 10 years from now to know how right we were?
So Mark, I saw you look at me first, so I
did.
assume I'm first up on the queue. I think 10 years from now, you're going to continue to see a lot of natural gas in the queue. I think you're going to see a lot of new natural gas get added to the system. It's going to operate in a different way than it's operated in the past. It's probably not going to be 8760 operational run times, but it is going to be the difference between lights on and lights off as we see greater integration of renewables. I am hopeful that we see some of the nuclear technology, the advanced reactors, come to fruition, because I do think those can be critical parts of how we solve a lot of the issues that are before us. I had the benefit of being in Wyoming last week and see where some of the DOE-funded carbon capture projects are actually being deployed at scale in a way that is very optimistic looking going forward. If that nut can be cracked and then transferred to other parts of the country, that is going to be part of the solution, whether it's deployed on a coal facility that will run longer or a gas facility that is going to need the carbon capture technology to operate. I am optimistic that we can solve that, and in 10 years that will exist. Whether we can build the infrastructure to support it is the caveat I will offer on, can a deal be struck around how we're going to build the necessary infrastructure, including carbon pipelines, and get the Class 6 permitting process squared away, so that once we achieve the technological success that we know we can do, can it be moved and stored where it needs to be because of the geologic differences that exist in various parts of the country. But I am very optimistic about where our sector, not just the competitive power generators, but the electricity sector is more generally. Our folks have met the challenges in the past. We will continue to meet the challenges in the future. The key will be, are we freed up in order to be able to do that? And if the shackles can be removed and we can meet some of the permitting, siting, challenge issues that we face today, I think we'll be in a very good place 10 years from now.
And we've been talking about primarily electricity assets, if you will, both generation and transmission. But you mentioned the continued role, important role of natural gas. Natural gas pipelines are similar.
Going to be critically
concern.
important. Yeah, I think the pipeline infrastructure that's there in many parts of the country is already fully subscribed. And so when you're telling gas suppliers, I'm going to need more natural gas than I am in the past. In fact, I saw a report this morning that said that data centers could add, is it 6 BCFD could be utilized to supply the amount of new load that may come on, which is a pretty big number. I think if you look at that, that suggests we're going to have new pipeline infrastructure for sure. The challenge is that pipeline infrastructure is going to operate differently than it did in the past. For the last 100 years, you had customers that wanted large amounts of volume, they were willing to sign a firm contract, and they were going to need much of that gas 365 days a year. You're going to turn it into a system where you're going to need units that are going to run maybe 30 days a year, but when they run, it's the difference between lights being on and lights being off. Are they going to pay for a firm contract for 30 days of gas that they are absolutely going to need? Can you subscribe to a pipeline and have it get FERC approval under the current rubric. That's a question yet to be answered. We're going to have to think about how we approach some of these challenges differently because the system is being asked to do things that it never was asked to do in the past. And I think we're up to that challenge as well.
Thank you. Rich, just to add to your potential projections, you mentioned several times long-duration energy storage. I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about that potential and its application and where it can be applied, and also hydrogen. Well, you've mentioned it a couple of times. I know the big challenge now is with the hydrogen hubs to increase hydrogen demand, to potentially blend it with natural gas, to put it in electric turbines. But can you also, in your prognostication, include those items?
That's a big homework list with the prognostic.
Well, we have some time.
We have some time. So the let's see. So
10-year horizon.
10 years from now, I think we'll be significantly further along on all of those things. I'm very glad that we started with the Leopold bit. I was also recently Leopold pilled.
Oh.
If folks have not read this, you need to read at least the beginning and the end, because I think a lot of the conversation we're having today about AI will seem very JV compared to the conversation we may be having 10 years from now.
Well, this is a little mysterious. You have to be in the club to know, but is this the superhumans? What are we talking about here?
Superhumans.
Yes.
That's in the next decade. We're going to have the equivalent of millions of superhumans capable vis-a-vis computers and robots if the technology is advancing on the same trajectory it currently is advancing. And obviously the implications for that are astonishing and frightening. And he recently spoke at our the same leadership meeting I was talking about. But it's, again, I can't do it justice. By the way, this kid's 23 years old, and he's incredible.
I'll focus on the astonishing part of it, which is, think about the grid that we may be able to manage in the future if we have, grid-enabling superintelligence managing the grid. Think about the permitting system that we could run if we had superintelligences preparing every permit application and reviewing every permit application before a human being comes in and double checks those things. Think about how much we could accelerate so many of the things that we think of today as things that have 6-month or 2-year or 5-year timelines to get done. Think of the material discovery that will happen that will enable things like fusion and high-temperature superconducting transmission wires and long-duration energy storage chemistries and next-generation electrolytic hydrogen production. So I think that the benefits we'll see of all of this are going to be enormous. I also think the locus of this conversation is going to shift very significantly. So the projections that we are looking at and relying on for our planning at SEBA show that even mid-range projections, low to mid-range projections of vehicle electrification and home electrification mean that even as soon as 2028, even if high-tech data center-driven electricity load growth continues apace, it will actually be primarily vehicle electrification and home and industrial electrification that are driving demand growth as soon as 2028. So that will mean that this will be increasingly a conversation about a much more distributed clean energy or electricity demand across the country. And so this will be much more about how utilities and load-serving entities, especially distribution-serving entities, are handling massive new, much more distributed electricity load across the country. And so I think more of those folks will be in this conversation trying to understand how they're going to meet just this hugely growing load. And then specifically on your question on both long-duration energy storage, we've obviously seen incredible advances there. Again, many of those driven by programs spun out of the Department of Energy, thinking about technologies like Form Energy, for example, the iron air, very low-cost, long-duration energy storage technology that's now being deployed in Maine as the result of the Better Energy Storage Technologies Act, which was included in the Energy Act of 2020, and is a 100-hour battery. Right? We're all so focused on batteries that are 2 hours or 4 hours. Think of a battery that lasts for the better part of a week and what that could potentially add to grid reliability and stability around the country. And by the way, that uses much less earth scarce materials. It's literally using iron and far fewer critical minerals as part of that. Just a very last point on hydrogen. I do think that the hydrogen, I think we perhaps were in a hydrogen bubble. I think that bubble has at least been constrained, if not fully burst. You know, a lot of the projections
Let's
of
not talk about bursting in hydrogen in the same
Okay,
sentence.
sorry, we're not. It's not bursting. It's not bursting. Many of the, particularly for green hydrogen, obviously, many of the projections of huge growth in green hydrogen relied on the idea that we were going to have very low cost, extremely abundant clean electricity. That no longer appears to be any kind of reality, at least through 2030, if not well beyond that. So I remain optimistic about other pieces of the hydrogen puzzle. Blue hydrogen seems, particularly advanced blue hydrogen that uses ATRs and other things, seems to still have very significant potential. Pink hydrogen still seems to have very significant potential, but I'm not sure that any of those electrons will go to hydrogen production. That's nuclear electricity generated production. For those of you that know the hydrogen will, but I think, but blue hydrogen I think still has a lot of potential.
Okay, Michelle.
So when we're talking about AI and the use in the energy sector and any other sector, I think it's important to keep in mind that we need to make sure that it is done with a very strong safety and responsibility and reliability framework. And there are colleagues that are across Microsoft working with many of our customers and governments across the country and around the world to help inform and build that and ensure that. When we think of what the energy sector will look like in 10 years, I kind of think about the beginning seeds we're seeing right now and how AI as a co-pilot is really helping energy customers and energy companies and achieve their goals today. And I want to give 3 quick examples, and I know that they were teased out a little bit. But when you think about the capabilities that AI can provide today, it helps us understand patterns in complex systems, it helps us develop new solutions, and it helps us empower the workforce. Here are 3 examples in the electricity sector happening today. Understanding patterns. There is a company called Line Vision that is a grid enhancing technology company. They are using AI to understand the existing flow on existing transmission lines, to identify where there is spare capacity to be able to run more currents, run more electricity, and send that. So, there is a company that is in UK that has been using that, and they've been able to free up 600 megawatts on their existing system to be able to deploy additional resources today. The second example is on solutions. And so Microsoft partnering with the Pacific Northwest Lab as part of Department of Energy has looked earlier this year on how we could look at all of the potential 2 million combinations of new lithium compounds to be able to deploy and reduce the amount of lithium that would be necessary in some of this battery storage. And it took them 80 hours to really narrow down to just a handful of combinations, what would have taken years before. And the third is how it empowers our workforce. And Rich mentioned permitting, and we're already seeing early applications, and literally applications, early use of this, to be able to really shorten the time it takes to put together the applications for potentially a nuclear plant or for an offshore wind, or for, so that really can empower the workforce at utility companies, but also really shorten that time frame that it required before it even gets in front of a regulator. So those are things we're seeing today, and just thinking of what could be capable in 6 months or 10 years down the road, but using it as something that helps humans and helps us achieve what we want to do.
Thank you, Michelle. David, you will have the last word, and you can use as much time as you need, as long as it doesn't exceed 2 minutes.
Perfect. Well, next 10 years, I really believe, and last night the CEO of TerraPower made the observation that we increased our energy production in this country by 60% during World War II. That's the type of scale of what we need to achieve for the next 10 to 20 years to meet the evolution of our economy and to meet our national security needs, I believe. And so that's a challenge. What do I think that's going to entail? I do believe that the AI is going to build upon itself, and it's going to be a bunch of stuff we can't even think of sitting here today. But for sure, I believe that natural gas will continue to be an important transition fuel for at least the next decade. I believe that we'll be closer to having hopefully just a couple technologies for SMRs, and we'll be on our way to having a nth-of-a-kind solution there. I believe that Congress will extend 45U for another 10 years, which you heard some of these numbers.
Heard it here first.
You heard some of these numbers around 60, 70, $80, right, for these other technologies. 45U, which is the nuclear PTC for existing nuclear, is capped at $43.75 based on gross receipts, only means adjusted tax credit in the code that I'm aware of for energy. Small price to pay to ensure that these resources can operate for the next 20 and 30 years under subsequent license renewals. I believe that'll get done. I think it has to get done. So those are some of the things, Mark, that I see coming down the pike.
Well, thank you. We'll have to leave it there. Please join me in thanking this very insightful and illustrative panel. Thank you.